Oh, hello, this is Tak Chung from Walk with Tak. The goal of my YouTube channel is to help you to make home cooking practical, efficient, creative, and fun using my fast cooking system, which is flavor chasing, advanced prepping, stir frying, and template-based cooking. And use my cooking system, you can cook almost any dishes that you would like, and you can create dishes on the fly. Depend on how you like it. This is an example demonstrated. I cooked this dish with pork rib. Now, I love ribs and I love barbecue ribs, but a lot of time, it takes a long time to cook ribs. And in this method, I use the ribs that I've cut into small pieces. This allows you to cook them rapidly. This is a very popular Chinese dish. Now, I freeze 2 portions of these ribs and I use one to cook a tofu dish. Now, in this case, I'm going to first coat the pork ribs with a thin layer of cornstarch, and I also coat it with my Walk with Tak basic seasoning mix. Now, the seasoning mix is great for cooking this pork rib because it makes the rib more umami flavor and it makes it more savory. Now, in combination of this dish, I'm going to use a couple of vegetables which make it more balanced. First of all, I'm going to use an eggplant. This is a eggplant referred to as a Chinese or Japanese eggplant. It's narrow and long. First, I prep them initially, cut them up into pieces for stir frying, and this is the right size for that purpose. But for this dish, I'm going to cut it further into smaller pieces. And this is the advantage of advanced prepping. You can modify the ingredients depending on how you like it. Now, in addition to this eggplant, I'm also going to use some cauliflower. This cauliflower refers to a Cantonese or Chinese cauliflower. And this cauliflower is slightly different from the traditional cauliflower. Again, I'm going to cut them into smaller pieces because it will fit the dish a little bit better. I'm also going to use some ginger. My wife loves ginger. Now, in this case, I'm going to mince the ginger using my manual handheld food processor. The minced ginger actually will provide the dish a stronger ginger flavor. And since my wife loves gingers. Now, here comes the tofu. This tofu is a firm tofu, and this tofu is also a very nice tofu because it has no preservative, and consequently I like the flavor better than the other kinds of tofu. I'm going to cut them up into cubes. This will allow it to fit the dish a little bit better. I slice it in half and then I cut it into cube size. Okay, after I finish cutting it, I put the box back over it. I flip the coupling door over. Well, this is a good way to store the tofu. Now I'm ready to cook the dish. I'm going to cook this dish in my Cuisinart 14-inch stainless steel wok. The reason, again, I like this wok because it has a large flat surface area, so I can use it like a small frying pan. Because the first step in cooking this dish, I'm going to fry the pork rib for a brief period of time. And I call this basically shallow frying because I have coated the pork rib with cornstarch. We will give the rib a nice, slight crispy texture. So, okay, now I'm going to lay out the pork rib on the surface of the wok. This pork rib is actually one of my all-time favorite meat dish. I really like the bone associated with the meat, and actually this gives the meat better flavor. If you are familiar with my other videos that I have made in the past, you'll notice that I use this method for many different kinds of proteins, this including chicken, shrimp, and beef. This is a very useful technique because it provides really great flavor for the meat. As you can see that the cornstarch will cause charring on the surface of the pork, and this adds a nice flavor to the meat. This method is very flexible, and you can use it in many different kinds of food ingredients. Now, by now, the pork is probably about 50% cooked. And next, I'm going to add the eggplant to the wok. And you notice that the eggplant is cut into smaller pieces than I have originally prepped. And the reason is that, first of all, is that it fits the dish a little bit better. And secondly, is that it is also allowed the eggplant to cook much faster. Now, the eggplant is added before I add the other vegetables because the eggplant generally require a longer cooking time. And this will allow me to give the eggplant basically a head start. Okay, by now, I'm going to add a little bit more cooking oil. You notice that after I add the eggplant, there's almost no oil left on the surface of the wok, because eggplant is well known for its ability to absorb oil. Now, if there's no oil in the wok, it is likely for the ingredients to get burned. So additional oil is essential. But you notice that I do not start out with too much oil in the beginning. This is followed by addition of some fermented black soybean. Now, I add the black soybean now for a reason, because this will provide greater flavor. Next is the cauliflower. Okay, this is then followed by the ginger. Now, all of this at this time is because for the reason, number one is that the fermented black soybean and the ginger added at this particular time point will impart greater flavor to the dish. The cauliflower added at this point because the cauliflower takes shorter time to cook in comparison to the eggplant as well as the pork. So by adding them in different sequence during the cooking process, I'm able to much better control the doneness of these ingredients. And I call this a sequential stir frying. And this is one advantage of stir frying that will allow you to add different ingredients at different time points to create the type of texture that you want. Next, I add some white mushroom. Again, this is another demonstration of how this sequential stir frying works. The mushroom takes less time to cook as compared to the other ingredients. Again, this will allow me to control how much I want to cook each of those ingredients. At this point, I'm going to add a little bit more cooking oil, again because mushroom has a tendency to absorb oil. This will allow me to prevent the food from getting burned, as well as to give the flavor that I'm looking for. A timing of stir frying is essential. As you notice here, is that even though stir frying is a very simple cooking technique, if you look at it on the surface, you just have to stir everything together. But the timing will allow you to cook them to the texture that you want. Now it is almost done. I'm going to season the dish first with some oyster sauce. Now oyster sauce is truly a flexible sauce. It will allow you to enhance the natural flavor of the ingredients. And by adding it at this point, it provides the best flavor. And this is followed by adding the tofu. Now the tofu is already ready to eat. So it really does not need to be cooked in this way that like other food ingredients. But all I want to do is to warm up the tofu in the temperature that I want. Now adding the tofu to the later stage has an advantage is that you do not break up the tofu from too much stirring. Once I add the tofu, I try to stir all the ingredients more cautiously so that I do not break up the tofu. At this point, I did a taste test and I decided that I'm going a little bit more sweetness to the dish. So I'm going to add some hoisin sauce. Now I'm going to start out with a small amount of hoisin sauce. I'm going to make adjustment accordingly. Now, so far this dish, the seasoning come from basically three things. One is that the fermented black soybean. Secondly is the oyster sauce. And third is the hoisin sauce. Now, at this point, I will continue to taste the flavor of the dish. And if I want to add some more and increase the strength of the flavor, I can add a little bit more oyster sauce. And I also add a touch more hoisin sauce. This is truly the best way to season your dish. Instead of just add a prescribed amount, as in the case when you cook with a recipe, you make adjustment according to your flavor because each ingredients behave differently to different type of sauces. And this I refer to as flavor chasing. Now, in many ways, this is a unique dish. I have never cooked this dish in this combination before. I have cooked ribs many times in the past, but I usually cook with other ingredients, such as with other vegetables. But this is the first time I cook it with tofu. The reason was simple, because for that evening, my wife asked me, can I cook some tofu? And I already decided I'm going to cook the rib for dinner. And so I said, well, I'm just going to combine both of them together. Now you notice that this combination might not work, but it turned out work really well. And I also added 2 additional vegetables. Okay, last but not the least, I'm going to garnish the dish with some scallions. Scallions always great to have on hand because they not only add flavor and texture to the dish, but it also provide a color to the dish, and this gives the dish a nice appearance. The total cook time of this dish is only about 8 minutes. And the reason that it is so quick and I can also enjoy pork rib is because the rib has been cut into small pieces. And now normally you probably do not find this type of ribs at most supermarket, but you can always go to a supermarket and ask them to cut it for you. Many of the supermarket which have butchering sections, they will able to do that. But in most Asian grocery stores, particularly Chinese grocery stores, they always have these ribs available. Okay, so this dish is simple and direct and straightforward to cook. I use this opportunity to basically to introduce you different ideas of how you can create your own dish. So keep on cooking. I will see you tomorrow.